One. Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Steven Pynakker, and I want to introduce a very special guest, Gerado from Mormon Stories. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Steve.
I got in touch with John Dehlin a few weeks ago, emailed him actually the Saturday before the Thrive conference. And I had asked him a question about something. And then I also said, by the way, I'd like to get Geraldo's email address because I'd like to have him come on the program. So that day or the next morning, that Saturday, he sent me an email and gave me that information. So that was really cool because, he's planning for Thrive and he made the time. So thanks, John, for taking the time to send me that email. And I really thought, I really like Geraldo. I've watched you as a co-host, occasional co-host with Mormon Stories. You are part of you play a very important role of the look and the feel and the aesthetic of the program, but also you're a great contributor to the show. So I thought, let's get Geraldo on my program. So uh, welcome. And this is going to be a fun interview. I have a feeling we're going to have fun tonight, folks. So I got my Red Bull going here because I've had a long day. I'm 2 hours ahead of Geraldo, so he's going to have an advantage over me with that. But part of the reason I want to have Geraldo on is because you have a fascinating story about your faith and your sexuality and the journey that you've been on. And I want to talk about that and also your history and time at Mormon Book Reviews. So to start this thing off, that was a long enough introduction, folks, and Geraldo's going to do most of the talking tonight. Let's just start with where you were born and what kind of family you were born into. Were you born in the covenant?
Yeah. So yes, so I was born in the covenant. Both of my parents were members of the church. They both served missions. My dad was a convert. He converted into the church when he was around 24 years old. And pretty sudden after that, he went on an LDS mission. So he served in Oaxaca, Mexico, and my mom also served in the same mission. So that's kind of where they met. Um, they didn't really talk much during their mission, but they knew about each other. And then after that, they got in contact, and then they ended up getting married pretty soon after that. And so my dad's conversion was, I think, it really happened during his mission. So he had a very, very orthodox, really by the book mission president who he still keeps contact with, and it's kind of like his second father. And that's where his orthodoxy really, really, became rooted in his mission and his mission experiences. My mom, my mom's mom, so my grandma, she found about the church when my mom was about 5 years old. So my mom was baptized in the church when she turned 8, and she grew up in the church. Something interesting about my mom was that she, through meeting some members from Idaho who were visiting Mexico, and went to their ward around the time my mom was a teenager. My grandma kind of like made friends with them and with this couple from Idaho Falls, and they offered for my mom to come to the United States as an exchange student to live for a year and learn English and learn how Mormonism is lived in the United States, because the church was pretty young, especially in Merida, where my mom was from. So so my mom's like testimony and experiences about what the church really was really built, I feel like, during that time where she lived in Idaho Falls. And then the idea of her serving a mission that also started during that time. And then when she went back, and then a few years after that, she decided to go on a mission herself, and that's where my parents met each other. And so they're both. I was born into a very, very Orthodox family. I was the first son. I only have one sister, so we were only two kids. But we were like Sundays were like strict, not watching TV, not listening to music that was not church music. Um, I know, like my parents were like, we in my house, we were not even allowed to drink Coca-Cola because that's part of like was part of Mormonism back then. And they still stand by that. Like they still, both of them don't drink Coca-Cola and those kind of things. So yeah, it, I growing up, I mean, I liked the church. I liked going to church as a kid, but from a very young age, I noticed that I had an attraction to guys. And
Okay, now before we get there, I just have a quick question
yeah,
for you.
yeah.
I want to know, what was your mom's experience like in America? What did she think of America? How was it for her?
Um, I know she loved it. She really liked the culture, the language, um, and living in it, even though it was Idaho Falls, it's still like a developed country. And so she really, really enjoyed her time here. And something I didn't say was that when she, after the year in Idaho Falls, she went back to Merida, and she liked it so much that she found another family to come back for another year to Arizona. So she lived for another year with a Mormon family in Arizona.
Okay.
Um, and so, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. That's very interesting. So you were telling us that you're basically that you start addressing your sexuality. Let's just start. Well, how old were you when you maybe recognized that you had same-sex attraction?
I, I, I remember honestly, like kind of like first grade, kindergarten, being attracted to guys. Maybe not sexually necessarily, but it was like an aesthetic attraction towards boys. On my grade, I remember this specific boy that I was attracted to from my classroom. I'm pretty sure it was before first grade. So I was really, really young. And those attractions continued, and they just became um like stronger and stronger. At one point, during like second grade, I feel like I recognized that I also had some kind of attraction towards girls, and um so because I knew that's kind of like what was expected, and that's what was right, like that I would talk to, for example, like my dad or my mom. Oh, hey, I really like this girl from my classroom, and this was around like second grade probably. And they would give me like tips on how to like approach her and stuff like that. um but again, this was, I don't think these were like sexual attractions yet. It was mostly like aesthetic attractions, because I think sexuality is a spectrum. So, and obviously when we were that young, I mean, I didn't know what sex was. So, but yeah.
So when you were at that age and you had these attractions, did you know what homosexuality or being gay was? Did you have any concept
Yeah.
of it?
uh, I I didn't know the concept when I was probably like first grade, but I learned it pretty soon. um I but growing up and going to school, I also was kind of like more feminine and had like mannerisms and stuff. So I would be uh maybe bullied a little bit by some other, like, classmates and stuff. And and they would bring up, like, like, you're gay and stuff. So
Hmm.
that's kind of like where I learned what gay was. I remember very vividly one time looking in the dictionary the word homosexual, and just kind of like trying to, I don't know, understand what, if it was a thing. And then I found it, and then I read the meaning, and I remember like my heart being like, super, like, just going crazy. And I just closed the dictionary. And another time I remember too, like asking my mom about it, like asking what she thought about two men being together. And my mom explained to me that that was wrong, or like that, that was not what God wanted, that marriage is between a man and a woman, like probably something very simple. But I do remember asking my mom about it, and she like obviously not showing an approval of it. But I didn't say, hey, that's something I experienced. I asked it like more like generally.
Hmm. Yeah, feeling her out and see.
Yeah.
So just explain to me maybe the culture of where you, what area of Mexico you're raised in, and maybe kind of about the culture in general, how they would view gay people.
So I was born and grew up in a city called Merida in the state of Yucatan, in the Yucatan Peninsula, which ironically that's where a lot of people, a lot of Mormons believe that that's where the Book of Mormon events took place. Um, and it's a very conservative state. Uh, Same-sex marriage was not legalized until this year in that city, although it was passed by the Supreme Court in Mexico several years ago. So it's really legally all around Mexico. But if the state didn't have it legalized, you still have to appeal for it, and it was like a whole process. But this year, the state I grew up in legalized same-sex marriage, which is pretty late for because Mexico City did it several years ago. So, but yeah, pretty conservative, um, and not many Mormons. So I was always, probably most of the time, I was the only Mormon on my in my classroom, like going to school and stuff. Um, and but and there was this, and like I said, like I think it was just the same as many other places. Like kids would bully others for being more feminine or being different and stuff. Like so, and that was before. So all the way from like elementary school to junior high, but high school changed for some reason. In high school, like the kids in my high school and my friends had a lot more open mind.
Mm.
Had a lot more open mind. So so kind of like the bullying stopped when I got into high school. And because of that, and feeling more accepted by by friends and other people, and gaining more friends, I was able to eventually come out to my friends.
And how old
um
were you when you came out?
and this was around probably like 14, 15, probably 14. So uh yeah, so I just told some of my best friends, my really close friends, hey, like, look, like I really have a really bad crush on this guy. And that's kind of like how they found out. And then they were like, oh my gosh, that's super cool that you're gay. And like, so they were super celebrating it and super accepting. And then pretty quickly I just started coming out to all my friends. And then all of a sudden I was out to like anyone but my parents and the church.
Mm.
So um at the time I came out, I started kind of living like a double life, where like I was one person, I was completely out and myself with my friends and in school, and then with my parents and at church, like I was not out, just like being just typical Mormon, seminary. Like I was probably best student in seminary, and just going to school, like being like the deacons and teachers president, and then all the leadership positions that you can think of. I had
Okay. So
as a
just real
youth
quick, you
leader.
have a faith in Mormonism, you believe in it. And how did you decide that you were going to come out to your friends, knowing that one, you're the only Mormon, so you almost have to kind of represent, you have that pressure. And what was the factors in deciding to actually tell your friends?
Yeah, so I think there were several reasons. One of them was probably just feeling more accepted and more uh embraced by my really close friends, and how they reacted to it just allowed me to like start being more of myself with everyone else. But also what gave me the idea that that was possible, well, something that I think I realized was that it was something that was not going to go away. And the church, like in Mexico, didn't really talk about the gay subject, like, and it was the time where like the Mormon and gays website didn't really exist. And in Mexico there was not information about being gay and Mormon. So it was this weird thing where I kind of still believed in the church, but I knew that being gay and Mormon was not possible.
Mm.
So I didn't know there was, like I had no idea there was something called like mixed orientation couples, and or like conversion therapy, or even just like progressive gay Mormons who stayed in the church. So because I didn't know that was a thing, my idea was like, I'm just gonna push. I think it's true, but I'm gay, so it just doesn't work for me. So I'm just gonna push through it, go through high school, go on a mission, and then try to live my life as like a gay
Mm.
person, and just probably leave the church eventually.
So earlier you had mentioned that you went through a dictionary and looked up the word homosexual. Did you also
Mhm.
go to like a Bible a concordance and go to the Bible and read what it said about homosexuality?
I don't think I did,
So
but I
like the
did know.
Leviticus chapters, you didn't, they weren't in there.
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
don't think I did, but well, I did know it was wrong. I did know, like, although like I didn't know how to approach it, and there was not a lot of information about being gay and a member of the church. Like I did know it was against the basic tenets of the church. Like I remember being mentioned in general conference. That's where like I got most of the information about that, about being gay. Like it was general conference, and specifically like the priesthood meetings. That's where like the topic would come out, usually by Pynakker or Elder Oaks would give a talk and talk about same-sex attraction, or the homosexuals. um so kind of like that's how I knew that
Got it.
that was not possible. It was not possible to be a homosexual and a member of the church.
So you're out to your friends in high school. Did you actually have a date in high school?
Yeah, so I actually did started dating around just around that time as well. Just going on dates with guys, and I had my first kiss and stuff like that, just like normal, like just the normal high school experience. um so I was living like a double life, because I was obviously like, going to temple trips for youth and not confessing about those things to my bishop. And I do remember feeling guilty like constantly, whenever like there would be a talk about the law of chastity, or about the importance of being worthy and to go into the temple. So I would feel guilty, but I knew I just I knew that coming out was basically not an option, that my parents would not accept me, and that it would just, I honestly didn't know what was going to happen if my parents found out. Like I honestly thought that they could kick me out of the house if they
Hmm.
found out that I was gay.
So what steps did you do to try to conceal your sexuality to your parents?
So I was just like one person so I was a really good student at school, so I had really good grades. My family had a pretty big family business, which was our main source of income at the time, and I helped a lot. I worked for the family business after school, and on during the summertime. So I was making my own money, uh, through the family business. So I was a pretty good kid, and I would go to church, do the stuff I had to do. So in some way, I had liberty, to like ask my parents to um just go out on weekends and like do stuff with my friends, and so because of that, uh, because of the liberty that I earned, I was able to just now be myself in just settings that were not my home and church. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So your game plan was to, like you said earlier, get out of high school, go on a
Yeah.
mission, and then start living your life. And so
Yeah.
I imagine that game plan included keeping it from your parents through that entire process.
Yeah.
But that's not exactly what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I have to say too, like that idea, I didn't come up with it by myself. So we had a neighbor who were actually just living, like the family were just living like a block um uh behind us. And they were Mormon, and they're part of our ward. And they had a son who I was friends with, and at the time he was at BYU. And it was rumored, like among members in the ward and in the stake, that the son was probably gay, and that although he was at BYU, he was probably not following the rules and that kind of stuff. So I got in contact with him because like he was a lot older than me, but we grew up in the same ward. um, so I got in contact with him, and we started talking about his experience. And that's kind of like where I got that idea of, keeping it from your parents while you go through high school, and then you just go on your mission, and then
Hmm.
maybe go to BYU, and then even at BYU you could be out and just do your thing. um, so that's kind of where I got the idea,
Hmm.
and I knew that that could be possible.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, you asked, like, that's not exactly what happened. So uh, when I was uh, when I was 16, so 2 years before my mission, um, my parents found some texts on my phone. Well, it was my mom, and it was during a church meeting. I think it was word conference, because my dad was on the stake presidency at the time. And I know he was on the stand. And um for some reason my sister asked for my phone, and I gave it to her. And then next time I looked, like, my mom has my phone, and she's reading through my like texts.
Mm.
And just my heart sank. And I knew what she was reading, and because I was texting with a guy during the church meeting. And then as soon as the meeting was over, she ran and handed over the phone to my dad, and said something. So I knew, like, it was over. So I think what I did was I just walked home, because we lived a few blocks from the church. And when I got home, I just called my best friends, and I said, hey, my parents just found out I'm gay, and I think I'm gonna get kicked out or from my house. Do you think I can go and stay with you? Can you ask
Mm.
your parents if that's okay? And they did, and they said, yeah. My mom said, that's fine, like, you can stay here. Anyway, so long story short, my parents came back from church. They went into their bedroom, and they just started talking. And I think my mom was just bawling and crying. Um and then um so I think they started kind of like just, kind of Googling and like church resources for that type of situation. Because even my dad, being in the stake presidency, he was not familiar with what to do in those kind of I don't think he had ever heard of it. Um,
Wow.
so because my mom knows English, they were able to find, the
Oh,
church resources that were available at the
okay.
time. Like,
So just real quick,
yeah,
I just want to ask
yeah.
you. So you're at your house now. Did they give you the cell phone back? or do your parents held on to it?
No, I think they held on to it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you get back to your house, you're calling your friends, you're
Yeah.
calling from the landline.
From the landline
Okay,
of
so they still have the phone, so you're thinking they're going through my texts, they're looking at my history, and you're
yeah.
like, okay, and I don't have my phone. So they come home, and your mom's bawling and crying. They close the door. What were you feeling like at the time?
Well, I I think it was just a combination of being anxious and sad and just really really stressed because of not knowing what was going to happen. Like I said, I was trying to prepare myself for like the worst outcome by calling my friends and asking if I could stay at their house. So it was just a mix of feelings. It was, I don't think I was crying, but it was, I think it was the worst I've ever felt in my life. Um, and yeah, I don't know if you have any other questions about that.
Oh yeah, well, so now your parents they start researching it,
Yeah,
and you had mentioned that your mom's bilingual, so she could access some of the
yeah,
resources that the churches had. So maybe talk about what. So now they're, because basically they don't know anything about homosexuality,
right,
so they got to educate themselves.
right.
So are they just using church resources? Do they go and look at other materials, or did they just focus on the church materials?
No, they only, I think, because they know what they, by that point they knew what the word
What the
what
world was
the
saying?
psychology,
Yeah.
field thought about it. And this is a part that I didn't I mean it's so hard because I feel like I have to leave so many details out because we don't have a lot of time. But so when I was in junior high, I know that the psychologist from the school, um he called my mom in, just to talk about like people, like kids bullying me and stuff like that. And she's told me that one of the things that the psychologist told her was like, Gerardo seems to have like a lenience. He like basically he's probably gay, and that's and there's nothing that you or anyone can do about it. That's just like a normal developmental, like just normal thing. And that is part of the human experience. And my mom got really really upset at the psychologist, and um she basically ignored it, and
Now, did
was
you
like,
know
yeah,
this
this
at
is
the time that the psychologist told her this, and did she come home and tell you, or
um
did she tell you about that later?
I don't I she must have told me something because I knew about the story, and then I recently asked her about it.
Mm.
And she told me like the more details on it, kind of like on how she felt. Because my question to her was like, how, because when they found that I was gay, like they kept saying like, why didn't you tell us? Like we didn't know, and they kept saying like we didn't know. And so my question to her like recently was like, so how didn't you know? Didn't this like situation happen where like the psychologist of the school pretty much told you that that was the reality? And she said that basically, when you're a member of the church and you have a preconceived ideas of what humans should be, and what you know what the path for a person should be, like, so it made her for her to like just block whatever the psychologist said and ignore it and just not think about it. um
And so,
but
even though you had like feminine qualities as a young
yeah,
boy, often
yeah,
people, like a lot of people say, "Mom knew from the beginning." You don't think she really suspected anything until they found those texts?
yeah. What she said is like she would just block it out, like just zone it out, like, whenever the question would rise on her head, like, oh, what, might Gerardo be gay, like she would just like not think about it, just thought stopping kind of thing. So she never really thought about it much, because she would just completely shut it down as soon as the thought came into her mind.
Okay, wow.
um
So basically, your parents now, so they're just dealing with church resources. And so
yeah,
now, what are
yeah,
they telling you? What are the rules they're provide? You're under their roof yet. So what is life like?
yeah. And you need to know that during that time there was not many official resources. Probably the most official thing was the pamphlet, God Loveth His Children. That was like kind of like the most updated official church resource. Um, and then maybe Boy K. Packer's pamphlet on To Young Men on only. But other than that, there were not many really official, like today's there's like a website that just talks about it.
So they weren't exposed to the miracle of
But they
forgiveness.
found, oh well, yeah, there was the Miracle of Forgiveness. Yeah,
Okay.
that's true. And I know my mom read the Miracle of Forgiveness before they found
Okay.
out about it.
Mhm.
Um, so, but honestly, I don't know exactly how the Miracle of Forgiveness influenced their thoughts. But I know that they found Evergreen through their research. That and they found that there was this organization, that was supported by the church and just helping people with same-sex attraction.
So was this
Um,
like a Mormon version of like Exodus International or reparative
yeah,
therapy a little bit? Talk a little bit about that.
yeah. So Evergreen was founded in the I think in the 80s and 90s by Latter-day Saints who experienced same-sex attraction and who wanted to build an organization that just was a resource for people wanting to stay in the church and deal with it. And through its like organization and everything, it got mixed into the conversion therapy that was pretty pretty strong at the time, especially through religious groups, like you're mentioning Exodus.
Mhm.
Um, so their approach really quickly became a therapeutic approach to same-sex attraction. And I know some people get really triggered by this term. And the reason same-sex attraction, the reason why I'm using it is because that's how they refer to it. And that's how the church used to refer to it. So that's why I'm using the term. Um, but anyway, so their approach was that people could change through therapy, um, and that the attractions they could be either completely gone or at least diminished, in order for members of the church to just live a chaste and like just follow the covenant path. um, so there was a lot of mixed orientation couples involved in it, and conversion therapists like Dave Matheson, who will end up being my therapist. Um, but yeah, so so basically that one day when they found that there was hope,
Mm.
they invited me into the room and they pretty much said like, look, um, there's these resources that can help you. You still have to go on your mission. Like that's probably like, is that something you still want to do? And so basically like there's this way to help you, but it's your decision. Like, what do you want? And you have to remember, at that point, I was scared of being kicked out of my house. So basically, I mean, I felt like I didn't have any other choice. I said, yeah, mom, dad, I want to be helped. Um,
And did you
and
really want to be helped, or was that just a survival
no,
mechanism?
I no, I didn't.
Okay.
Because I didn't at that point. But then when my mom just got in contact with them and they started sending her like the resources and the pamphlets and just all this stuff, and then as part of like my commitment to my parents of wanting help was that I was going to read it and I was going to do all this stuff. I became indoctrinated into the idea that like the same-sex attraction um was not inherent and that could be changed. Like, so it was a process of me changing like my ideas that I had before and getting convinced that I probably could be helped. And and it got combined with the fact that I still love the church. I still like enjoyed the church, and I still believed it. My testimony was not super strong, but I mean, I saw my other friends, being Catholic or Christian, and like in some way I knew like this has to be the true church. Like there's no way the others are. So yeah, so the combination of those two things, I got convinced that yeah, I could be changed.
So there was a moment where you actually thought you could be changed.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I even went to my friends, the friends that were not Mormon and that were very supportive of me coming out, and I told them, like my parents are asking me to go through this, and I feel like I really want to, and I feel like I can be changed. So I need your support in this, because I'm gonna really try this therapy.
How did your
um
friends respond to that?
they they were pretty supportive. Honestly, they were like, okay, I mean, if that's what you want to do,
Hmm.
that's fine. um and but I mean, that was it. They didn't do much, but they said, yeah, that's fine. Like they didn't try to talk me out of it or anything.
Hmm.
um and so when my mom contacted Evergreen, she said, like, look, I want the best therapist available, and the one that has the most success and the best one you have. So she was referred to Dave Matheson. And so I just pretty quickly got set up with him and started having Skype meetings with him,
Hmm.
because we were in Mexico. And
So you didn't go to a physical location. You were doing all
no,
the counseling via Skype.
yeah, everything was through Skype. Yeah.
Did they have any retreats that you went to, or was everything?
They were they they there were, like, the journey into manhood, because Dave Matheson is a co-founder of those retreats, that we were kind of like, we were suggested and to that I could go to, and that it would be helpful. We kind of looked into it, but I never ended up going.
Okay.
But it was just like a hard thing to set up, like how, like, I would have to fly here, and then like,
The
yeah.
logistics, yeah. So you sit in front of your computer and you're going to go through your first Skype session to get straightened out. Um,
Yeah.
what was that like, getting ready to talk to this gentleman, and how did that first conversation go?
um Honestly, a lot of it, I don't remember the details. A lot of details I remember, some stuff. So I remember a lot of it was just talk therapy, was just talking about, so the the root, or the idea of conversion therapies is founded on the premise that you had a distant relationship with your dad growing up, and too close relationship with your mom. So you have to fix the relationship you had with your dad, and the relationship you have, and the relationship you have with boys, or guys, that was probably not enough, and you probably hanged out too much with girls, and that's what made you gay. um so the therapy was a lot of trauma therapy. I've movement, there's this therapy called I've movement. I can't remember exactly the term, but it's basically like, it's a type of therapy that is used to get over trauma. And we use that, or Dave Matheson uh used that with me, to just get over, like just ex- experiences that I had, or that I had with my dad being like angry at me and stuff like that, or just stuff that, like he thought damaged our relationship, or like that we were not too close. So the whole thing was like trying to get you close to with your dad again, getting over the bullying uh trauma as well, and embracing your your masculinity.
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, what was your relationship with your father for most of your life like? And two,
Yeah.
I also want you to get back a little bit this eye movement thing. I want you to kind of explain what that's all about.
Yeah. So my relationship with my dad was not great. Like my dad, uh, you because he was really a person that's really invested in his work and at church, like he had big callings for most of my life growing up. Stake presidency for 9+ years. So I didn't really have a close relationship with him. And the I so so that's the thing. It kind of like the narrative that Evergreen was telling me, and that the conversion therapy was telling me, kind of fit my experience, which was that I did have a way closer relationship with my mom
Mm.
and with women. So it was a lot easier for me to make friends with women than with guys, because of my feminine side or whatever, I like more feminine things. It was more easier, I think, for me to just uh relate to girls or women. And so part of the therapy was also making goals or commitments that I would start hanging out more with boys and not too much with girls. So my parents would kind of like try to watch that, kind of like, where are you going with, like, like, are there gonna be any guys there? Or is it just girls, like, and that kind of thing. I'm really quickly. Okay, so the therapy is called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and this is a legit, method therapy that is used in, in just normal settings of therapy. But David Matheson would apply it in the context of changing your attractions towards your same gender. And I'll just read you really quickly what it says here, just for your listeners to kind of have a little bit more context, because this is what was part of what we were doing. So it says eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is a controversial form of psychotherapy in which the person being treated is asked to recall distressed images. So he would ask me to, recall times where my dad yelled at me or when I was bullied. And then the therapist then directs the patient in one type of bilateral situation, such as a side-to-side eye rapid movement or hand tapping. And yeah, so that's kind of like, you close your eyes, you kind of look one side, you remember a certain experience, and you move your eye to another place. And that's kind of like, I'm trying to do my best to explain what was happening.
Yeah. Interesting. So, how did it go overall, this experience? You're doing these counseling sessions, and this is kind of leading up through the period of time where you're going to be graduating out of high school and also serving on your mission. So maybe just talk about that transition period and how the therapy, if you will, factored into that.
Yeah. So the therapy went on for a period of about a year. And I think it was after a few months of doing it that I just realized it was not working. That the attractions were just as strong as ever. And so I started to pretend, which I mean, I'm speculating, but my guess is that I'm not the only one that did this, on conversion therapy camps or in conversion therapy sessions. So I just started to pretend and just telling David that it was working. And I kind of just went back to my plan A, which was pushing through my mission, and then basically, and then just come back, maybe go to BYU, and then at BYU just be able to date guys and do my thing. So yeah, so yeah, I just realized it was not working. And so I would tell, like, David would ask me, like, kind of like to rate my attractions towards guys and then rate them towards women, and I would say, oh, like, my attractions towards guys are lower now, and that kind of stuff. Something that was in some way helpful was that because I was going on my mission, I was never asked to date girls. So I was never asked, okay, let's go now and try it and see how it's working. Because like I was not gonna date until I came back from my mission. So
Okay, so you had that
that was a
cover
little helpful.
there. Okay,
Yeah.
so so you're in with this for a few months, and then you're progressing towards graduation. You're doing the mission field. Where are you at? What's your mental space like? Where are you at? First of all, where are you at spiritually, and then where are you at mentally at this point?
Yeah. I mean, at that point, like I said, I kind of went back to plan A, but I knew I had to go on my mission. And I also really like knew that the only option for me to, even after my mission, to really be myself, which is pretty ironic, but was gonna be BYU. Because in Mexico there's this culture uh, of you don't move out of your house until you get married. And I'd say most of my friends from high school, and who, I mean, they're pretty good financially, they have pretty good jobs, but people, they're my age, and most of them haven't moved out from their parents' home. So I knew that was the expectation from my parents. So I knew the only way to get away from it was gonna be BYU. At one point, my mom had told me, like, because my dad didn't want me to go to BYU. Part of it, I think, it was that he had seen, or neighbor, what had happened to him. But my mom at one point, she said, once you serve your mission, your dad won't be able to tell you anything. Like you've done what he asked you to do, and then you can just start taking your own decisions. So that's where I was at. Spiritually, I still knew I had to go on my mission, and in some way I still believed the church was true. But again, I knew that, I mean, I tried to change and it didn't work. So I knew, like, I mean, the church was not going to work for me, which is funny because, like, I would still invite my friends who were not members to come to church meetings and stuff, and I would still want them to convert or be part of the church. But in my mind I was like, it will work for them, but not for me.
So you were actually already mentally checking out of the church at this point, still do your mission, go to BYU. So you envisioned yourself, what kind of faith did you envision having after you graduated from BYU? Your own kind of Christianity? You just pick and choose your thing, or go to like a mainline church?
Mainly just like not really thinking about it and just being, not really like religiously, just being like this, just super back of the thing that was super back of my mind, just
Okay.
like not really.
Okay. All right. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit about where did you serve your mission? How did that go? And then let's talk about your college years.
Yeah. So my mission, I was called to Mexico City, so that's where I served, and my conversion really happened on the MTC, on the Missionary Training Center, where at one point we were asked to, like, kneel down on one class. We were asked to kneel down and just pray and ask God to give us a testimony if the church was true. And then at that point, I opened the Book of Mormon and found a scripture that really touched me, and I think really applied to my situation. So to me, that was like my response from God, and I really got convinced that this was the church. But for more than half of my mission, I still knew, even though I still had, like, I had a really strong testimony, like I was a super hardworking missionary, I was super obedient, I knew that going back, it was not gonna work for me. Like, the church was not for me. It was for other people, and I converted a lot of people, but not for me.
So what years was it that you served your mission?
I served 2013 to 2015.
Okay, so that's
Um,
interesting. Now, of course, 2015, we had the November policy, right?
yeah, yeah, and that happened right after I came back from my mission. Uh, so I'll just go really quickly. So at the end of my mission, I was I mean, I served in all leadership positions, zone leader, and then when I was called to be the assistant to the president, that's when that's when my testimony just like exploded, and I was like, like this church is super true, and the gospel is super true. Like I have to go back home and try again and try to change, and I have to marry a woman and just do what the church just teaches me.
Hmm.
um so so I ended up my mission with that idea again, that I was going to be able to change, and that I was going to date women. So but I when I came back, so when I came back from my mission, my parents were had lost the family business, and so my really only option was going to BYU Idaho, because BYU was way too expensive, and my dad was the one doing the release interview. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but like when missionaries come back, they're interviewed by the stake president. But the stake president was out of town when I came back, so my dad was the one doing the interview, and it was like a super powerful experience. Like my dad and I were crying the whole time, and I told my dad, like, I really feel like I need to go to BYU Idaho, because I feel like um someone from Mexico, like a girl from Mexico, is not gonna understand, this whole same-sex attraction thing. But a girl in the United States, in Utah or Idaho, they're more familiar with the topic, so they might be able more they'd be more open to it. And so I still had the idea of coming to the US, but doing it in a faithful way.
Wow.
um and so yeah, so I was home for 6 months and started applying to BYU Idaho, got accepted, and during that time I started dating a girl from Merida, and she was a pretty good looking girl, and she was super like interested in me. And at one point in one of our dates, she kissed me. And well, but before that, I realized, like, it would I really wanted it to work, but I also felt like I would get uncomfortable whenever, like, she would try to hold my hand or get too close. It would feel like really uncomfortable. And the last drop was when she kissed me, and it was just, I mean, it's not that she's a bad kisser. It's just it was an awful experience. Awful. Like I dropped her off at her house. She kissed me, and then I got in my car, and then I started crying, and because I was like, this didn't change. This is not gonna go away, and I'm not even attracted to girls. So like I can't do. And at that point, remember, like I already had kissed guys, so I knew what that felt like. I knew what it was supposed to feel. Um, so I called my best friend, who had also just came back from his had just recently come back from his mission. And I told him about it, and that's kind of like how I cope with it. And then pretty soon after that, it was a time to come to BYU Idaho. But at that point, I had decided that this was not going to go away, and that dating women was not a viable option. But I didn't tell my parents. And but yeah, so that's how I arrived to BYU Idaho, already with that mindset.
So it wasn't a lack of trying on your part to try to conform to the standards of your church, and you gave it your best
Yeah,
shot in your mind. That's interesting. So, now, of course, BYU Idaho has a reputation of being much more conservative than
yeah.
Provo. So you get to there, and you have a very conservative culture.
Mhm.
What was it like? Just this culture that you entered into, and your college experience in general.
Um, my college experience in general was fine. I mean, I still believed in the church.
Okay.
So I at the for the first 2 years, for the first 3 years, I had no, I would say two. I had no problem with Idaho, with BYU Idaho being so conservative and so church focused, because I still liked it. Um, and but at the same time, behind the scenes, I was like on the dating apps, on Tinder. I mean, there was not a lot of guys on the apps and stuff that were out and willing to go on dates and meet. But I was able to meet a few guys and date around a little bit. And at the same time, I just focus on I was really focused I really knew what career I wanted to do, and I was like laser focused on that, and I enjoyed it because I knew what I wanted to do. I was taking classes that I liked and like doing stuff that I was really passionate about, and at the same time as I was working, and just staying super busy. So it was not super hard um, until I met my current husband, Zach.
Zach. Okay, so tell us a little bit about Zach. Where's he's from? What's his
Yeah.
background?
So Zach is from Idaho Falls. He had like his experience was a little bit different from mine. He also kind of knew he was gay uh, before, but like didn't really came out to himself. And then he went on his mission. He had not the best experience on his mission. He experienced a lot of depression and anxiety during his mission, and then but served the whole 2 years and then came back, and then realized, okay, yeah, like date. I think he tried to date a couple girls, and then came to the same conclusion that I did, which is like, I don't think this is gonna work. So realized he was gay, and he started getting into the dating apps. He dated a guy, and at the time, because he was from Idaho Falls, he was commuting, so he was living with his parents, and then driving to Rexburg for classes. um, he started dating a guy for the first time, and then eventually they broke up, and his mom found out or something. I think he told his mom, and it was like this huge thing. Like she made him go and confess to the bishop, so he had to do that, and I think he had to like stop going to school for a couple semesters, and then eventually, when he was ready to be accepted again, he decided to move to Rexburg, and that was January of 2018. So, and it was right when he moved to Rexburg where we matched on Tinder, and we met, and we went on our first date, and we clicked really fast. Like, I was super attracted to him, and then we just started seeing each other. We just saw each other every day after that for like the next couple months, and made it official super quickly too. And then something I think I had mentioned to you since the beginning, one of the first things we talked about was that we both agreed that we both believed in the church, that we both believed the Book of Mormon was true, and that maybe the church had it wrong on the gay issue. Maybe we were going to go to the celestial kingdom, but we both felt like we had done everything we could do to make it work, and it didn't work for us. So in some way, we felt not justified, but we felt like the best path to be happy in this life was going to be, being in a same-sex relationship.
Okay. So now, at this point, your parents still think you've been fixed, or you're going to make try to find a girl and get married, right?
Yeah. So I think I left that part out too. But so what? So yeah. So when I got to BYU Idaho, they were really insisting, like, hey, are you going out with girls? Like, how is it going? And wanting to know like about the girls I'm dating. But so it was way before I met Zach. Well, probably about a year before I met Zach, that I had already told my parents, look, this gay thing didn't go away, and I am going to just push through my career. I'm gonna, still go to church. I still believe in the church, but my plan is not to marry a woman. So please stop asking me about that.
Hmm.
So that was kind of like that's kind of where we left things at that point, and we didn't really talk about the subject anymore.
So now what's interesting to me about, because we talked about this off camera the other day, and also I watched some recommended clips from your interview with John Dehlin, is that you guys' courtship, if you will, was pretty quick. I mean, like very Mormon.
Yeah, super Mormon. Yeah, I think we made it official after like 3 days.
Hmm.
And then 6 months after that, it was 8 months after that. um I eventually invited him to come because I visited Mexico, my family, during the summer. So I told him, hey, why don't you come with me to visit Mexico? And he said, yeah, I'll do it. And so we went to Mexico together. We invited another friend to kind of like, like not raise many red flags for my parents.
Mm.
And it was in Mexico where we got engaged. So that was in August, and we met in January.
Wow.
So he got on one knee and asked me to marry him, and I say yes. We had already talked about it. We had talked about marriage and stuff. Like you're saying, it was really like a really Mormon relationship.
Yeah. Now let me
Um,
ask you, it's so unusual. I mean, you're 26.
yeah,
I mean, your generation, they don't get married. I mean, even your
yeah,
friends at that age, even your friends are still living at home in Mexico.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
what made you guys make the decision? It's very unusual now for, I mean, is this part of your Mormon heritage that you got married at a young age? Was that something you talked through? Like, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it like right? Or what was your, I mean, 'cause that's today, that's very young to get married.
Yeah, I think I already longed for this for even when I was a little kid. Like my dream was to have a boyfriend and eventually a husband and get married and like uh I don't know if like have kids was part of the plan when I was a kid, but like definitely have like a committed relationship. So it was always like part of my like what I wanted, I guess. And definitely very influenced by my Mormon upbringing for sure.
Wow. So, I guess I just want to ask you a question just about your relationship. Like you had mentioned you weren't sure about having kids. Have you guys discussed having children?
Yeah, so now we have and we talked about it earlier too. But so we are both licensed foster parents right now. We don't have any kids under our
Oh,
care,
okay.
but we are licensed through the state, and we're pretty much open to whenever the state tells us like, look, there's this kids that need to be placed in a home. So
So
yeah.
that's how your parental role would be like in a fostering situation. Then is what you're
Yeah,
looking at.
right now our goal is to find a kid that what it's called foster to adopt, where we can like do foster for them and then eventually adopt them. Yeah.
Wow, well, that's interesting. So I want to get to Mormon stories a little bit because we're short on time, but I want to just kind of wrap a bow on this a little bit about your relationship and your family and your parents. So, have your parents met your husband?
Yeah. So so like I said, I'll go through this really quickly. We got engaged. My parents didn't know. We were in Mexico. We were staying at my parents, and they didn't know. We
Hmm.
didn't tell them, obviously. We came back, and then oh, something I think will be important is like our faith crisis. So so we got engaged in August, and then in January, um after coming back from a trip, we found Mormon Stories, and we started listening Mormon Stories like episode after episode after episode. And then I just became obsessed. Zach a little bit less than that. I think Zach just really quickly got like, okay, yeah, the church is not true, and like I've been told a lie my whole life, and I'm fine with that.
Book of
But
Mormon's hogwash, that kind of thing,
yeah,
basically. Okay.
yeah. But I got really upset. I would go to the BYU-Idaho library and get a bunch of books. and on, Graham Palmer, Dan Bogle, the Tanners, all the books that you can imagine are available at the BYU-Idaho library. Todd Compton. And so, and yeah, so I just became obsessed with it. I learned everything I could about it. And I told my parents. So I really quickly, because I was so mad at the church that I had been lied to. Um, and part of it was being mad at like my parents, like kind of like, how could they not know all this stuff?
Mhm.
Like, how come when it was about same-sex attraction and all this stuff, they went and researched it, like, and like read books and like just crazy about it. But then, because eventually, like, I told my dad about my faith crisis. I told him like, look, I found this, and he heard me for like 40 minutes just go rant about like
Mhm.
all the thoughts I found. And but then after that, it was, he didn't really fight, he didn't really say much, but after that was just crickets. Like, he never really brought up this subject again. He told me, don't tell your sister, don't tell your mom, and that's it. And so I was really, really upset that, like, how come they were really willing to help me when it was this same-sex attraction thing, but then right now that I'm going through this, they're not willing to, like, he's not willing to go and research it, like, to try, because at that point I was like, okay, try to help me a little bit with like, what are the answers to these questions and stuff. um Anyway, so I told my mom, and eventually I just told them both, like, look, I don't believe in the church anymore. At the beginning, I tried to keep my faith on Jesus, because I bought the book, because that one was not at the BYU Idaho library, from Grant Palmer, called Leaving Mormon Jesus for the Jesus of the Gospels.
Yeah, the
But
incomparable Jesus or something like that, and that was, or yeah, I know which book you're
yeah,
talking about. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Was that a good
um
book? I haven't read it. Was that a good book for you?
it was a good book. It was a
Hmm.
good book, but something that kind of like was weird, because growing up Mormon, I had a really per, a perception about the Bible, and then reading Graham Palmer's book, there's this chapter where he admits that the Bible has issues, and the issues are significant. Um, and that's And I was like, well, how can you be telling me to still believe in Jesus, but then the Bible has issues, just as the Book of Mormon, just as the Book of Abraham? So, like, what's this all about? And so, but I did try to keep my faith in Jesus, but then I was also listening to Mormon Stories, and then the David Bokaboy episode came out on Mormon Stories, and I listened to that, and that was when I was like, okay, I well, I think Jesus might have existed. I definitely don't think it is as, as Christians put it, or as Mormons put it. Um, so I became like a lot more agnostic, because my husband still makes fun of me, that he told me, oh yeah, don't you remember, you even told me like we should keep praying and like do a couple of prayers and stuff like that, even after like our initial Mormon faith crisis.
Hmm.
um that he makes fun of me that I still wanted to pray with him and read the Bible with him. And but yeah, after that I was like, because I do remember I started reading the Bible, prompted by Grant Palmer, and this was before Book of Boy. I started noticing, just by myself, I started noticing this progression among the Gospels, that the Jesus of Matthew was a little bit different from the Mark, and then definitely way different than the Jesus of John. And so by myself, I started noticing those things. And then when David Bokaboy just came out and said all that, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll just dump it all. Um,
Yeah.
and in some way, it was a relief for me. Like, I think we talked about it too. Like, just the feeling of not knowing, like, I don't care if they're like, I'm not gonna say there's not a God. I'm not gonna say like, that there's not an afterlife, but I'm okay with not knowing. And I what I am sure about is that no one in this earth knows certainly what's gonna happen after this life. Um and I'm okay with that. But my husband did have a really hard time with his faith crisis. He started having panic attacks just because of he had a harder time with like that the same fact of like not now like we don't know what's going to happen after this life. What is this life about then? What's their purpose like of still living? And he had a much harder time than I did.
Okay. Well,
um
that's very interesting. I want to say to the audience that I actually had lunch with John Dehlin, and I told him my story about how an episode of the gospel of because I was essentially I was where you were at.
yeah.
If anything, I was actually more hardcore. I would have considered myself a hardcore atheist at some point, and I
Mm.
would at the time I would have considered myself an agnostic. And when I watched a particular episode, and I'm going to talk about this down the road, it actually started pushing me back into Christianity.
Mm.
So I told John, so John, you actually led somebody back into faith as a result of Mormon stories.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be an interesting story to tell one day. So just real quick, so your relationship now, where do you stand with your parents? Now, your father's a bishop right now, is that correct? Or
Yeah. So
okay,
my dad was recently called as a bishop. Zach's dad was also called as a bishop
wow.
recently.
Hmm.
And yeah, so both on my interview on Mormon Stories, like Zach's family were in a way different place, and people can go and listen to that if they want. But we both feel very supported now by both of our by my parents and by his parents. My parents come to our house and stay for a week or two. Like this year, they've come, like 3 times already, and they stayed at our house. And we have a great relationship. My mom loves Zach, um, just as like her own son, and it's just it's just great. We have a great relationship, but it didn't start that way. It was definitely a process. um when I told my parents about my faith crisis, it took it really hard. And then um and then when they and then one of my main reasons why I decided to tell my parents about the faith crisis is because I knew eventually I was going to tell them about my relationship with Zach. So it was going to be preparing them for that.
Mm.
Because if they knew that I didn't believe in the church anymore, in my mind, it was going to be easier for them to take the fact that I decided to,
Mm.
pursue a same-sex relationship. Um, so so they didn't take it as hard when I told my parents about our relationship. Zach and I got married while we were going to school at BYU-Idaho. So
Yeah.
we got engaged in August, and then the next July, so about a year after, that's when we got married. And then I graduated in December. Um, and and that's when once I graduated, that's when he told his parents, and he had to tell them the whole thing, that he was dating me, that he got engaged to me, that he got married to me, and that he had lost his faith. So like all these things he told his parents in like a one sitting. So it was really a lot harder for them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were on this road trip and you started binge listening to Mormon stories.
Yeah.
And so then, how did you get to know John Dehlin? How did that whole process begin? Where now you are a part-time co-host and kind of a full-time producer of Mormon Stories.
Yeah. So when we were at BYU-Idaho and we got married, I emailed John, and I pretty much told him our story. And I told him like, we're married, we're at BYU-Idaho. It's been really hard for us. Um, and he responded, and he linked a few resources for us, which was really helpful. And then we came to Thrive in November. I still hadn't graduated. So the first Thrive in 2019. Then I graduated in December. We both, Zach and I, moved to Utah, and then John held a retreat pretty soon after that. His faith crisis retreats that he holds with Natasha Helfer and Margie. And Zach and I went to that. We went. I had just graduated, and we were broke pretty much. Like, we had no money. We were fortunate to like find jobs, full-time jobs, pretty good jobs, once we moved in. But at the time, like, we had just moved in, we had no money. And so John has this amazing donors that donate, so like people can attend this faith crisis retreats sometimes at a very low cost. So that's how we were able to attend to them, to the retreat. And then that's when we were actually able to meet John. I mean, we met on Thrive. We only took a picture with him. I told him like, hey, we're the ones that are married at BYU-Idaho, but that was it. But then on the retreat, because it's a lot smaller group, we were able to talk to him a lot more. And then when he started recording when he started doing the episodes with Dr. Rittner about the Book of Abraham, I think one of my favorite subject on Mormonism is the Book of Abraham.
Yes, let's talk about that.
So I was eating those interviews, and he was struggling with the lighting and the cinematography because of COVID had just hit. He didn't have like someone helping him anymore, so it was just him running the whole thing. And so he put out like a request on his Facebook saying like, is there someone that knows lighting or something like that? And my major was in graphic design, but I took a lot of photography classes, and I knew something about video. I worked also, part of the work I did before graduating was on video. So I just contacted him and I said, hey, I can help. So I view John as like one of my heroes, and I think I still do. The work that was most important to me was not Mormon Stories or the interviews he did. For me, what was the most healing thing that he has done was the study that he did for his dissertation on his PhD on the LGBTQ Mormon experience and conversion therapy. That was the main like subject, conversion therapy, and trying to prove if it worked or not. And he found that 0% of the people that go through conversion therapy actually change. And that study like completely changed my life. It made me feel like no shame anymore about being broken, about not having been able to like change. And my mom at that time, she was still she had told me several times that, well, it's because you didn't try enough, you didn't put enough of your effort into this, you were not faithful enough, you didn't believe enough. It was always put on me. But like seeing like that study really opened my eyes, and it's like, it's not just me, there's like 1,000 people in this study that had the same exact experience.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when we stop and think about it, that on my side, I kind of like sometimes like to cross over a little bit. And the Exodus International folks was like the main organization that was, you could change your sexuality and all that. And there were many evangelical organizations and some Catholic. People don't realize there are a lot of traditional Catholics that are also into the gay conversion movement as well. One of the most prominent advocates of it was Catholic. So we kind of had to deal with that when all the science started coming out. But not only that, but it seemed like just about all the founders and leaders and people of these groups ended up coming out of the closet and saying, no, it didn't work. And you actually have a similar experience with the guy from Evergreen.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, my Dave Matheson, my therapist, he came out in the midst of our faith crisis. So while we're like, like I'm like studying all this like Mormon history that I had never heard about, Joseph Smith polygamy, seer stones, all this stuff. My conversion therapist comes out, says he divorced his wife, and he admits that the conversion therapy that he did helped pretty much no one to change their same-sex attraction. So that was during that time, and I think by that point I already knew about John's study, but yeah, so
Wow.
yeah,
So
it's been a
John played
lot.
a major role in so many aspects of your life, and now
Yeah,
you actually have other job that you have, but you also do assist with Mormon Stories and stuff like that. So just talk maybe a little behind the scenes,
yeah,
um, just like what's it like to work for John? What kind of person is John like?
yeah. So okay, so I started, so I I got off track, but when John put out the thing and I said, hey, I can help you, I started helping him, and I started as a volunteer.
Okay.
um so I told him I don't want to get paid, I want to give out this time because of
Mm,
how much Mormon Stories has helped me.
mm,
and he was okay with that. But then as I started just helping more with the podcast and just getting more involved and just um helping, putting more hours in, like he told me, look, I think what he tells everyone, like, just volunteer help at this level is not sustainable for you. Like eventually you're gonna get burned out if you're not getting paid.
mm.
And I need you, like you're an essential part of Mormon Stories right now, so I want you, I want you to get paid. um so we made the arrangement of I bill my hours to the Open Stories Foundation at the same rate that I do, like that I make with my full-time job. So
Okay.
I have a full-time job, and I put on like about 10 hours a week on to the Open Stories Foundation.
Wow. Wow. So
Um,
like last night, I was watching a live presentation of Mormon Stories. Were you involved in that, producing that at, at the time?
the
Or
one from last night.
yeah, I'm just curious what role you play in an
So
episode.
yeah, so I don't play the role uh, on all episodes.
Okay.
But I do make the thumbnails for all of them. So the
Okay.
YouTube thumbnails and the ones that they use
Oh
on the
wow.
website, I make those.
Okay.
So I get a call, like or like we right now we're using a communication app, and then I'm told like this is the title, and then I just make the thumbnail. uh I go every couple weeks, sometimes a couple times a week, to the studio to
Okay.
just fix the lighting, because sometimes gets moved, sometimes we have two people, sometimes one, so we have to move stuff.
Uh-huh.
um and um and 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 then also I'm involved, like you mentioned, in co-hosting some
Hmm.
episodes. So
Yeah.
usually when it has to do with LGBT topics, I cover those. Or if there's a topic that I'm interested in, I usually I ask John, hey, can I be on this one? And then I can co-host that one.
Okay.
um there's also some episodes, I would say most of the episodes I'm in, I help plan from scratch. So like I come up with the topic, the idea, I contact the speakers or whoever is going to be presenting, I make sure everything is like set up, and then John just goes through our slides, our presentation, or our outline, and then we record the episode. um
So how much research or
and
prep goes into doing it? Like how many hours do you prep for an episode, you and John, when you're going to do a co-hosting of
yeah,
it?
it depends. I think for so there was one, the Mormon that we did, it was called the Mormon inoculation. I put in about probably like 5 to 8 hours on preparing that one, because I have to go through the slides, communication with the people that are going to be in it. The one that we did with about Elder Oaks, being in the University of Virginia, that
Mhm.
one I put in a lot more out. I think that's the one that I put the most hours,
Oh,
because I had to go through the entire speech of Elder Oaks, take out the time codes, decide which time codes we're gonna use, coordinate all the people that were going to be in the episode and making sure that everyone knows what we're talking about, which time codes I decided, like running it through them, editing the time codes and stuff, like, and then listening to also the behind, like, the other part that was recorded of Elder Oaks Q&A, and deciding which parts were like the ordering which where we're going to present it, what we're going to focus on. And John will go in and just look at the slides and give me feedback and say, hey, I don't think we should go this route, we should do this. Sometimes I push back and say, no, I think we should really do this, and this is why. And we end up reaching an agreement. And yeah, so that's kind of like how things go right now. And I now you ask about how is it working with John, like, before meeting John, and he was like, like, I think like how many people see him, like, I mean, you either see him as like a demigod or like as Satan. and for me, he was like a demigod, but just knowing him, he's just like a normal person. And I get really uncomfortable when people try to prop him as like, like this, just like Jesus figure, because I don't think he's human. We're all human. I make mistakes all the time. He makes mistakes. But I also recognize, like, most of the times, like on my dealings with him, that I'm a lot younger than him, so he might have more wisdom or more experience than me. So I consider a lot that on our conversations, our decision making. And Kara started getting involved after I was already involved, and so now Kara does a lot more than so mostly when I'm involved in is like usually for an episode that I'm gonna be in, or a thumbnail or the video background kind of stuff.
Okay.
And so yeah, going back to like John, working with John, yeah, I mean, he has his flaws. He sometimes he has a lot of ideas but not enough time to put them together. He wants to do all these interviews. He contacts usually like people about interviews, and he doesn't have time to get back to them. Oh, he forgets. And there's like something like then Peggy Fletcher Stack wants to do a piece on the Open Stories Foundation, and there's something more important like for him that he feels like he really needs to cover. And and the other things are put in the background. Like, I'll tell you, like right now, there's an episode that I've been wanting to do, that I've been coordinating with this person to do, and then he just hasn't had time, to schedule it yet. So, and I mean, I don't get mad. Like, he's working, he's like crazy working. So it takes I think a certain personality to I mean, I'm not saying like I'm the only personality or Kara is the only personality that can work with him, but definitely I can see how there's other personalities of people that just wouldn't be able to put up with it, or because of their ideas or preconception of John being like, the demigod, like he just comes down from grace. He comes down from grace for them. And yeah,
I'll tell you, I saw that it manifest itself when I had lunch with John, and it was like, man, he's just a regular person. That's how I've been engaging him, as just a regular, a fellow image bearer, somebody that I just, want to just talk to and have conversations with. And I will tell you, when I had lunch with him, I was sitting watching him last night, and he was very animated. And I said, I had Mormon Stories in front of me. A Mormon Stories an episode in front of me at the dinner table, because he brings that same intensity to the table.
Yes.
And so I thought, if you're a very sensitive person, or if you're easily offended, I can see how he could rub you the wrong way. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I see how, like, I know this kind of personality he has. It's a very intense type. I mean, I've dealt with type A personalities and all these type of people throughout, I was involved in politics, so I know this kind of person. people, you don't understand. He is a very busy guy, and he really is passionate about what he's doing. I'll tell you, there are some people who have told me terrible things about him. I mean, it's like they can't stand the guy, and a lot of them say, well, he promised me this or this betrayal. He sometimes just gets too involved in things. He gets involved
Yeah,
in too many things. So I
yeah.
say cut the guy
And
a little slack.
yeah, there's something, and he admits, he's always saying like, I'm a terrible manager. Like if there's this thing that you want to do, like you guys have to manage it yourselves, because I don't know how to manage things. I'm like, and he's always saying that. And I think he's open about his flaws, at least to us. And like, so again, I could get frustrated at times and stuff, but it's it's part of the experience of working for any organization.
Yep, that's right. That's right. And I I've had enough interactions with John that, like, if he doesn't return a text or if he doesn't return an email, I don't take it personally. But there are a lot of people that do take it
Yeah,
personally. So I
yeah,
think it's just a
yeah,
combination of all those traits that people think maybe they're getting blown off by him, and I don't think that's necessarily the case all the time. That's what's happening.
yeah.
So I just say let's just try to practice a little more grace and patience and understanding towards our fellow man and women. So oh, if somebody walks into the studio of Mormon Stories, what would their impression be? I mean, is it state of the art? Is it nice? Does it? I mean, just tell us a little bit about the studio and its layout.
Uh, so um, so the studio is in this, like, the building is a little bit older. So it's like this offices building. So I think there's lawyers in the building and stuff, and maybe a dentist. I don't know. But then you go into, like, find the door, and then you enter, and the first thing that you see is the main studio where he records with people face to face. And that's kind of like my whole setup that I did for him. He used to use all that space for his, well, initially for his faith crisis retreats, but when COVID hit, he said, we're not going to be doing any of those retreats, so we can use the space for the studio. And so that's what that's where people are going to see. It's messy. There's cables everywhere. um there might be a bag of chips like on the floor or something, and but we try to keep it as clean as we can when people are coming over. At least that Kara does a great job with that, and John does a great job too, because I'm not there the whole time like they are. And then at the back of the room, to the left, that's where the studio is set up for him to do the live videos on the computer, where he's like by himself. Recently he's adapted it to have Kara or someone else on it too. I Hopefully he doesn't hate me for saying this. I told him this. I don't love that setup of having two people right next to each other the whole time on camera, but he likes it, so he's gone away with it. So I haven't really been able to come up with a better solution for that.
So, well, I appreciate you giving us a little bit behind the scenes. There's so many people that watch the program and they just imagine, what is it? And of course, when you're producing something, you're always, it's the magic of creating an illusion, if you will, of things. And so it's like, I'm a Cubs fan, and a lot of people watch the Chicago Cubs on television, and they'd watch the games. They see this beautiful ballpark, and then when they get there, it wasn't quite as majestic as they thought it would be because because of the way they shot the ballpark and stuff like that. So I just thought, well, I got to hear a little bit about the background, the nuts and bolts that maybe isn't discussed a lot about.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're running tight on your time, and it's actually 10:15 on the East Coast here. So I just want to thank you so much for coming onto my program.
Yeah.
We didn't get to everything we wanted to get to. I wanted to get to that Book of Abraham thing that you wanted to talk about, and maybe we can have you back on and we could talk about that sometime.
Sure.
But I just want to thank you for coming on, and I just want to ask you, do you have any like final words that you would like to impart to my audience?
No, not really. But I because you have a very broad audience, so it's hard for me to like just give a message.
Yeah.
Like when I'm doing an LGBT episode on Mormon Stories, like I can direct it to the audience,
Yeah. Yeah.
but no, just probably just saying like uh yeah, I mean, from for the last part that we're talking about, just about the last part we're talking about John. I mean, John, Mormon Stories, it's just held by real people. It's just being done by real people
Yeah.
who have flaws and mistakes, and yeah, I think the something that John always says that I try to implement in my life a little bit, not because I hold him as a guru or anything, but I just think it's wise what he said about that phrase specifically. He said, When we know better, we do better." So, yeah.
Oh, that's a wise, sage advice there. That's awesome. Well, thanks again, dude. I really appreciate you coming on. This was great. And, it's just great building these relationships with people and talking to the full spectrum of the restoration. If you saw what channels people watch, it goes from Mormon Stories to Midnight Mormons and everything in between. And so,
Yeah.
and it's a real blessing. And I'm going to have somebody from Midnight Mormons on soon, too, as well. So I'm talking to everybody, folks. So, like, I'm not taking any sides. I just want us to be fair and balanced. And I kind of want to be a referee and or the umpire and call balls and strikes, if you will, and not try to take any sides in this whole thing. Um, so either way, I just want to remind my audience to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification button so you'll be informed when a new episode comes out. Folks, we're entering the holiday season. Be careful, use common sense, just enjoy this holiday season. And where in the Christian world we celebrate the birth of our Savior. Thanks again once again for coming on to our program, and you all have yourself a great day.